Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome into another edition of Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports, alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. Well, Alabama basketball is back in the Associated Press Top 25 after gutting out a win over the hottest team in the SEC. Alabama big man Noah Gurley came up clutch twice in the final minute and a half in a 68-67 win over the Arkansas Razorbacks. First, this bucket to give Bama a 66-65 lead. Then Gurley hits another one with 27 seconds to go, which gave Alabama the lead for good. And the Tide snapped Arkansas's 9-game winning streak, beating a team that had just knocked off top-ranked Auburn just a few days prior. Alabama had two players score in double figures, J.D. Davidson with 11, Jaden Shackelford finished with 10. Alabama led by 5 at the break and got the lead to as many as 13 in the second half before going cold and letting Arkansas rally. Arkansas actually took the lead. But Alabama, the bottom line is, winds up going 2-0 last week. They had a big road win at Ole Miss, and then that home win against Arkansas. They're now 6-6 in the SEC, 16-9 overall. As I said, back in the top 25. Here's Gurley talking about his clutch baskets in the paint to help deliver the win over the Hogs.
You know, Coach always tells us if we got an advantage, go make a play. So that kind of was just my mindset and energy. You know what I'm saying? Not letting the energy drop, you know, staying positive, you know, because all we needed was one stop, you know, one board, and a lot of things will change.
All right, Rod, let me bring you in here. Huge wins last week. First of all, getting a road win, even though Ole Miss is struggling still. To win on the road is big. And then to get that win over Arkansas, as I said, a team that had won 9 in a row, and it wasn't pretty. Alabama turned it over 24 times. 24 times. You're not going to win many times when you do that. They shot poorly again from 3, 24% in the game. But, as I said, this was one where they just kind of gutted it out. They got some defensive stops when they had to have them. And unlike their personality, usually when they're shooting threes or they're penetrating, trying to get to the rim, they actually ran a play twice for Gurley in the paint. And against Williams, the big 6'10" shot blocker and charge taker for Arkansas, Noah came through, much like he used to play at Furman. I thought he looked comfortable there, and I hope it's something that maybe we see more of going forward.
Yeah, let's hope so, Gary. And again, you said it. Gutted it out, gritted it out, however you want to phrase it. I mean, you got to find ways to win games like this. You're up by 13. They take the lead. What was it, 66-65, Gary? But Bama comes back, finds a way to win. I mean, you need these kind of wins. This team, I think this is a big step in terms of helping this team develop. And you mentioned what a great week to go 2-0. Ole Miss over in Oxford, winning that game. So, again, hopefully this team now is starting to kind of feel itself a little bit.
Now going forward, you have a home game tomorrow night against Mississippi State at Coleman Coliseum. The Bulldogs beat the Tide 78-76 back on January 15th when Keon Ellis had a three-pointer rim out at the buzzer. So Alabama will be looking for payback in that game. They got to do a better job on the backboard down the stretch against Mississippi State. They didn't rebound. That's been a problem for this team this year. And then you go to Kentucky. So let's be honest, that's going to be a long shot. But getting this win tomorrow night at home would be huge for Alabama.
It will be. I mean, it'd be just like the last two. I mean, you needed to go on the road and win that game at Ole Miss. You're favored to win that game. You did it. At home, you're playing, you mentioned it, Gary, a red-hot Arkansas team, the hottest team in the SEC, 9 straight wins. You found a way to win the game. So, again, hopefully that's something of a confidence builder. Mm-hmm. And in Mississippi State, if you can take care of business there, and then, as you said, go on the road to Kentucky.
And this Alabama team has some of the best wins in the country of any team that's playing basketball. Well, now it's time for Coach Talk. Alabama guard J.D. Davidson is the SEC Freshman of the Week. Now, he struggled against Auburn, but boy, he's starting to find his way. During one stretch against Arkansas in the second half, Davison scored 8 straight points by himself. Now, earlier today, Crimson Tide head coach Nate Oates talked about his young star's increased confidence.
He's gotten more comfortable playing more aggressive, you know, on offense as he's played harder on D. You know, he's getting some rebounds, some blocks, some steals. He's getting better on the defensive end, and I think his offense is just becoming more comfortable as he gets more aggressive, the more he gets himself into the game on the defensive end.
Rodney is a freshman, and he's going to be up and down. Scored 11 points against Arkansas to lead the way, had 18 against Ole Miss, also had 8 assists in that game. As I said, he had gone through a little bit of a slump, particularly down at Auburn where he really struggled, but now he's the SEC Freshman of the Week for the second time this season. He's uber talented, but again, true freshman, just out of high school. There's going to be peaks and valleys, but when he plays well, this Alabama basketball team, they're just a different team.
Mm-hmm. Well, too, I think people have to understand that the adjustments you have to make going – he didn't play in the largest classification in high school to begin with, so there's a big jump to the SEC, learning your role, figuring out what it takes to play on this level. And sometimes it takes some time, but again, his contribution has been really clutch.
Indeed it has. Well, what had been previously reported as we turn to football is now official. Former Georgia quarterback Joe Cox is the Crimson Tide's new tight ends coach. Cox arrives in Tuscaloosa after one season coaching tight ends for his hometown Charlotte 49ers. He spent the 2020 season coaching wide receivers on Will Muschamp's staff at South Carolina, and prior to his time in Columbia, he was on the staff at Colorado State for 5 years, beginning as a grad assistant and then moving up to coach wide receivers and helping out with the tight ends as well. All right, this is another new hire for Alabama, Rod. And again, we've just come to expect this with Nick Saban. The success continues, but every year it's a different staff. 4 new assistant coaches this year. Joe Cox joins Eric Walford, who will coach the offensive line, Tavares Robertson, the cornerbacks, and Coleman Hutzler, special teams coordinator and outside linebackers. We've talked about this before, but how impressive is it that Alabama has so much turnover in its staff? We see this at other places sometimes, and the programs just fall off a ledge. At Alabama, it just keeps rolling. Yeah,
it's very difficult. Obviously, they do a great job. Nick Saban does a fantastic job, better job than anybody evaluating coaches, assistant coaches, just does a fantastic job of that, Gary, and the system that they have here when they bring the guys in. But Joe Cox's guy has a lot of SEC experience. Remember, he was starting quarterback 2009 at Georgia, was a really good high school player, a Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of North Carolina, has a lot of experience. You talked about the South Carolina experience. He's coached wide receivers, he's coached tight ends, and he's young. He brings a lot of energy. You got to think that's going to help in recruiting.
Yeah, he followed Matt Stafford at Georgia, but that season that he was the starter, statistically, he put up one of the best seasons of any quarterback in Georgia history. I think he had 24 touchdowns.
He did.
2,000 yards passing.
He sure did, nearly 3,000. Yeah. So he did a really good job as a player. And because, again, Gary, I go back to that, the youth that he brings, he can really relate to the players today. Yeah,
recruiting is, hey, listen, coaching on the field is important, but so is recruiting. All right, still to come on TITV, Alabama baseball is set to get the 2022 season started this weekend. Stick around to find out how good we think Brad Bohannon's bunch will be. And Alabama softball season, well, we already know they're really good. They got off to a fantastic start out in Arizona last weekend. Are expectations for winning it all too high for this team? I don't think so. And also, we'll be getting to your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, the phone number, as always, 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. Email us at TITV@WVUA23.com or tweet at us. Use that hashtag TITV so we can find it. We'll be back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. Tider Insider TV will return right after this. Bama softball capped an undefeated opening weekend at the Candrea Classic in Tucson, Arizona with an 8-3 win over New Mexico Sunday afternoon. What a weekend for Alabama softball. It outscored its 4 opponents, and these are good teams now. Southern Utah, Oregon State, Arizona, and New Mexico by a combined score of 35-4. 35-4, Rod. They've got a tournament this weekend here in Tuscaloosa. Good teams coming in, including Virginia Tech, which has one of the best pitchers in the country. But Bama softball is back. And welcome back to TITV. We're back as well, sponsored by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Crimson Tide now comes home, as I said, to host the Easton Bama Bash beginning on Friday and running through Sunday at Rhodes Stadium. Alabama softball came into the season as the number 2 ranked team in the country, right behind last year's national champion, Oklahoma. And they were also picked to win the SEC for a 3rd year in a row among the SEC coaches. The Tide's returning 11 players from last year's team, and they added 3 transfers and 6 freshmen. And, Rod, let's just get into this. They lost in the World Series semifinals last year, Florida State, so they were right there in position to win the national championship. And after what we saw this past weekend out in Arizona, and I know Oklahoma's loaded. I know that Oklahoma is loaded, and UCLA's loaded. And Florida State's good. But this Alabama team, I think, can play with any of them. It's been 10 years since they won their only national championship. Could they break through again 10 years later?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, they've got the pitching, obviously. But how about those bats, Gary? You talked about 35 runs in those games. Only gave up 4. Megan Bloodworth, what a debut.
Hey, I mean, get to know that name, although how can you forget a name like Bloodworth to begin with?
She has, 2 home runs, the first Grand Slam. in her first game. 3 home runs, I think, in the first 2 games. So 10 home runs overall, I believe it was, Gary, in the event. So what a start.
And Allie Shipman, the transfer from Tennessee at catcher, everything she was billed to be. She's a potential All-American. And you mentioned, everybody thinks of Montana Fouts, but this pitching staff is deep. They pitched 4 different pitchers out there in Arizona, and all of them were effective. As far as Alabama baseball is concerned, Brad Bohannon's squad will get the 2022 season underway on Friday afternoon as they begin a 3-game series at home at the Joe against Xavier. Crimson Tide finished the 2021 campaign with a 32-26 record, and they made it to the Ruston Regional, hosted by Louisiana Tech, the first time to make it to a regional since 2014. Now they're attempting to go back-to-back. I had Coach Bo on my radio show this morning on Tide 100.9 FM. He said, listen, before you can win a regional, you got to get there, and you got to get there enough times that you break through, then you got to get to a super regional and eventually, hopefully, back to the College World Series that Alabama hasn't been since 1999. I never dreamed it would be 23 years between World Series trips for the Tide. Connor Prelip, who could still be a first-round draft pick, Tommy John surgery, didn't pitch much last year, may not pitch this year, although he's listed on the roster. This is going to be a young pitching staff. But, Rodney, the good news is, after talking to Coach Bo this morning, lineup-wise, he feels like, listen, we got some experience, we've got some guys that have done it in this league, and our talent level is getting closer to where it needs to be.
Yeah, it sounds like when you look at them defensively, they're set. I mean, they look strong in the infield. You talked about the pitching. They've got their 3 starters ready to go. Sounds like they've got a lot of speed and power in the outfield. So, listen, we've talked about this for how many years now? You've got to take that next step.
Yep.
They took the next step last year. Can they take another step this year?
A big step this year would be to host a regional instead of having to travel. They haven't hosted since 2006. They haven't been to a super regional since 2010. And as I said, they haven't been to the College World Series since 1999. But I know this much. Coach Bo's got the track record. He recruited most of the talent on those great teams at Kentucky with John Cohen. He was recruiting down at Auburn and helping Butch Thompson build that program. He knows what a good baseball player looks like, and he knows where to go get them and how to get them, even though Alabama still is working with 11.7 scholarships, and that's a tight 11.7. There's no lottery money. There's no Hope scholarships. There's no out-of-state tuition being waived. There are no endowments as far as like private schools like Vanderbilt have. So this is what I'm getting to, Rod. 6 of the top 10 teams in the preseason are from the SEC. You can be good in this. We'll have a really good team and, finish 10th or 11th or 12th. It's so hard to make up ground, even though you're getting better. Those teams ahead of you are just juggernauts.
It's competition. I mean, we see it in the SEC. We see it in football. We see it in, the various sports. We see it in basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been difficult for him, even though you mentioned it, Gary. I mean, when you're talking about a recruiter and evaluator, there's not many that are better than he is when it comes to that, and we really felt like that would be his strength. So, again, can you take that next step this year after really doing that kind of last year? Can you take the next step this year?
Well, we know a lot of people are excited about this Bama baseball season. Again, afternoon games this Friday, Saturday, Sunday against Xavier, then 2 midweek games next week, and then next weekend they go to Texas. Who, oh, by the way, the SEC's tough. Texas is ranked number 1.
They are.
So this Alabama baseball team not playing around. Well, this past week, Alabama women's tennis coach Jenny Mines, how about a milestone? She recorded her 300th win as head coach of the Crimson Tide women's tennis program. The 2021-2022 season is Mines is 25th with the Crimson Tide, which makes her the longest tenured head coach at Alabama, and she has the Crimson Tide at 7-0 so far this season. Congratulations to Coach Mines. She's a class act. When she got here, Alabama women's tennis was kind of an afterthought, and she has built this program up to become a national contender. Congratulations, Coach. Well, coming up on Tider Insider TV, Alabama Gymnastics had yet another great performance this past Friday night, and one of the gymnasts received an honor from the SEC. Find out who when we return. And up next, your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, the phone number, 205-348-9882. You're watching Tider Insider TV. Go ahead and give us a call. We want to hear from you next, right here on WVUA 23. This past Friday night, Alabama Gymnastics hosted longtime rival Georgia for the Power of Pink for breast cancer awareness, a special meet and a great night for Alabama. They scored a 197 or better for the 4th consecutive meet, beating the Gym Dogs 197.475 to 196.8. Shalyn Olsen was huge for Alabama on both vault and beam as she scored a 9.9 on both events. Lily Hudson was named the SEC Freshman of the Week following her performance as she scored a 9.95 on floor and a 9.9 on bars and a 9.875 on beam. And Elisa Blanco won the all-around as she combined to score 39.5 points on the 4 events. Next up for the Crimson Tide, a meet this Friday night down in Baton Rouge against LSU. And welcome back to TITV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. If you've been trying to get through, I know you were getting a busy signal for a while, but the phones are back up, and if you call now, you can get through. And John from Bessemer was able to do exactly that. Hey, John.
What's up, Gary? How y'all been doing, man?
Doing great, John.
And the reason I'm calling, man, I want to know is Alabama going to have a good defense this year? And I want to know what day they're going to have the AA game, brother. I'll holler at you later, brother.
All right, John. All right. First of all, A-Day game will be Saturday, April 16th. That date has been set for A-Day. And as far as the defense, they had a good defense this past year, Rod, and I think I'll let you add to this, but the short answer is yes. I think Alabama ought to be really good on defense.
I think they ought to be fantastic. When you look at them, Gary, they return a lot of guys up front. Obviously, you're going to have the best two outside pass rushers in the country.
Oh, yeah.
Will Anderson, Dallas Turner. Inside, Henry To'oTo'o comes back, really like him. There'll be a battle there. Maybe Jalen Moody wins that other spot. You're solid in the secondary. You've got a lot of veterans. Jordan Battle and DeMarco Helms at the safeties. Brian Branch is back. Malachi Moore's back. You've got Elias Ricks coming in, who was a five-star corner at LSU. You've got Corey Jackson, who started in the championship game at one corner. You've got Kool-Aid McKinstry. You kind of get the drift.
Yeah.
They got a lot of really good players coming back.
They really do. Thank you, John. Let's get to an email. And this is from Lawrence in Tuscaloosa. Do you guys think J.D. Davison will enter the NBA draft? Lawrence, that's a great question. And I want to say this about J.D. He is so talented. I said that. He's uber talented. He's got incredible athletic ability. As a basketball player, I think that it'd be beneficial for him to stay another year. Now, that might not matter. If he's projected as a first rounder, we know a lot of times these guys will go. So my answer is I think he should come back, but that does not mean that he will.
You know, Gary, the question is, how does he compare to Primo last year in terms of the mock drafts? Primo was kind of getting some projections in the first round. He left. I know that you see J.D., you see some of these mock drafts have him at number 20.
Yeah.
So that might be difficult to pass up.
Yeah, we'll have to kind of see how it goes, but boy, I'd love to see him come back for a second year. All right, let's get to one more email before we have to go to the break, and this is from Marty and Jasper. I want to believe wins over Ole Miss, Arkansas help rebuild Bama's basketball confidence. Your thoughts? Yeah, I think they did. I mean, if you're struggling, there's nothing like winning. There's nothing like success. I still think shooting-wise from the three-point line, they were much better at Ole Miss. Didn't shoot it good against Arkansas, but I like what Coach Oates said. He knows these guys can shoot. And, they gutted that one out against Arkansas, which is a really good team. So, yeah, I think their confidence is high going into this game tomorrow night against Mississippi State.
Yeah, I do, Gary. I agree with you. And I think you talked about gutting it out. I think also when you give up the lead, you have a chance to fold.
That's right.
But they didn't. So they came back, won the game there at the end, as you said, gritted it out. And I think that's really big.
Yeah, nice bounce back coming off that Kentucky game where they were terrible offensively. I mean, one of the worst games I've ever seen Alabama play under Nate Oates, and to come back and go on the road and beat Ole Miss and come home to beat Arkansas, that's the way to get it back on track. All right, coming up on Tider Insider TV, the NFL Draft Combine is set to take place in a couple of weeks as players have their final opportunity to show teams what they've got. Stick around to find out which Alabama players will be heading to Indianapolis. And more of your phone calls, emails, and tweets. And understand the phone lines are working now. So give us a call at 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. We'd love to hear from you here on Tider Insider TV. We'll return in a couple of minutes. 11 Crimson Tide football players have been invited to the NFL Draft Combine, which will take place at Lucas Oil Stadium, Indianapolis, Indiana, where the national championship game was from March 1st to the 7th. Offensive tackle Evan Neal, running back Brian Robinson Jr., wide receivers Jamison Williams, John Mechie III, and Slade Bolden. Defensive lineman Fedarian Mathis and LeBrian Ray. Good for LeBrian Ray. Linebackers Christian Harris and Chris Allen. And defensive backs Jalen Armour Davis and Josh Jobe were the 11 players invited to next month's Combine as they prepare for the 2022 NFL Draft. And again, this is where Alabama's had so much success, not just in winning games at the college level, but sending players on to the NFL. So they get a large number of Combine invitees every year.
Yeah, I think it's second in the nation among all the teams.
This year,
I think Georgia had 14.
Yep.
So.
And that's second. You finished second, and you finished behind Georgia. And I guess there's a reason Georgia and Alabama are playing the national championship game. 25 invitees to the NFL Combine. All right, let's get to a phone call as we get back out here on the phone lines. John in Moundville is with us. Hey, John.
Yes, sir. How's it going?
Going well. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Yes, sir. I was going to ask about Pete Golden and the basketball team also.
Okay.
How come our defense ain't always been the same as like it always used to be over the years?
Okay. And what about the basketball team?
And yes, sir. I was going to ask, how come they always like up and down all season?
Okay. All right, John, we got you first on Goldie and the defense. Rodney and I have discussed this a lot, John. The game's changed, man. What you saw 15 years ago, even 10 years ago from defenses, you just don't see anymore. I would argue with you that despite all the negativity, statistically, Alabama's defenses have still been pretty good. This last year, they really took a step up. And plus, they're playing against some of the most high-caliber offenses in the country. So, you know, you're not going to hold all these teams to 10 points anymore. But I think Alabama's defense is still pretty good. Yeah, there was a stretch here when Coach Saban first got here, you know, say 2009 through about 2016 where those defenses were dominant. But it's hard to play that kind of dominant defense anymore.
Look. What did we hear all last season? Georgia had this generational defense. Well, when Alabama had their weapons,
let them up.
Bryce Young threw for 421 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Lit them up.
Threw for 370 without his top 2 receivers in the championship game. So, you know, it's just really difficult, I think, with these offenses nowadays. You can have a really good defense but when you're playing against the elite wide receivers and quarterbacks, it's difficult.
All right, thanks for the phone calls and the emails. We'll be back to wrap up this edition of TITV on a beautiful evening in the City of Champions. We're back after this. Bama at the Super Bowl. The Rams beat the Bengals in a thriller, 23-20, and with that, 3 former Bama players got Super Bowl rings. Ashawn Robinson, who had a dominant game. Outside linebacker Terrell Lewis and long snapper Carson Tinker, all members of the Rams. Meanwhile, on the losing side, Jonah Williams and Damian Square came up just short in their quest for Super Bowl rings. But you can't have a Super Bowl anymore without Alabama players. Congratulations to those 3 that got to hoist the trophy and those 2 that came oh so close. All right, that is going to do it for this week's edition of TITV. Real quick on John's second part of his question about Bama basketball being up and down. Young team, that's just the way it goes sometimes. Hopefully there'll be more ups and downs from here on out. All right, the program has been presented by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Catch a replay tonight at 10:30 here on WVUA 23 or find it anytime at WVUA23.com. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Alabama women's basketball came up just short against Kentucky this past weekend, and we're going to leave you with some highlights of that, or no, we're not. Good night.